Mhm.
Hello, Lainey.
Hello, Virginia.
How are you?
Oh, cold and chilly in New York City, but making it.
Well, two-thirds of the Library Love Fest team are here tonight. Grace Caternolo is working the back, the the behind the scenes. Um, as we get ready for our new edition of Writers to Watch. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Writers to Watch. We have a wonderful lineup of authors with us tonight. It's an embarrassment of riches, and we are so grateful to them for being here. We have Alison Bechdel, author of the forthcoming book Spent, Jess Walter, So Far Gone, Christopher Moore, Anna Rising, Uzma, Jalaluddin, Detective Auntie, and Meg Mitchell Moore, Mansion Beach. Um, it's a great lineup. We're so excited and so much looking forward to hearing the authors talk about their forthcoming books. Lainey, do we want to do any housekeeping? Are we good? Or we just want to jump right into it?
I don't know if we have the slides for our next two events, but I will say March and April are both confirmed and on Crowdcast and Facebook. So if you're liking what you're seeing, oh, I knew they'd
Hey-oh.
be there. Thank you, Grace. You really are this all powerful person on behind the screen.
Yeah, I'm
So
the
sorry,
big
can you go
voice
back to
in the
March?
void.
What?
Yeah, I'm a big voice in the void.
Okay, March, crazy. April, crazy. We're so excited to have two episodes in the queue, and we're getting ready for some more. So stay tuned. You can watch it where you're watching now and join us again. This is a fun monthly event. So looking forward to having you in March and really looking forward to tonight.
Yes, 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 yes. So, we have a lot to get to. It's a little bit after 7. And for the next hour, sit back, listen to our authors, and think of some questions you want to ask them. You know how this goes. We bring each author on and have them talk a little bit about their book, just about 5 minutes or so, and they go away. And after everybody has talked about their book, then we bring all the authors on, and they are here to answer any questions you have about their books, the writing process, anything at all. So start forming your questions, and we will start right now with Alison Bechdel.
Hi, thank you so much
Hi,
for having me.
it's so wonderful to have you. It's so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you, Virginia.
Um,
So
big fan
shall
of
I
yours.
I'll just start
Oh,
talking about my book. Is that the plan?
well, I'm gonna do a quick intro,
Okay,
and
sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry,
Just a
I'm so
quick.
eager.
No, believe me, I love that you're eager, and I love Fun Home so much. I love the play. You're just so amazing. So anyway,
Thank you.
brief intro. Alison Bechdel's cult following for her early comic strip Dykes to Watch Out For expanded wildly for her family memoirs, the New York Times bestselling and Time Magazine #1 Book of the Year graphic memoir, Fun Home, which was adapted into a Tony Award-winning musical, and Are You My Mother? Most recently, The Secret to Superman's Strength was named a New York Times Best Graphic Novel of 2021. Bechdel has been named a MacArthur Fellow, among many other honors. Her new book, Spent, is a laugh out loud, brilliant, and passionately political work of autofiction. Our protagonist in Spent is a cartoonist named Alison Bechdel, who runs a pygmy goat sanctuary in Vermont. And she's horrified by a world on the brink, aren't we all? And I'm going to stop reading the description, and I'm going to have you tell everybody what you want them to know about Spent.
Okay, I'm going to tell them and I'm going to show them by sharing my screen and showing some images as I talk, okay?
Great. Yep.
Uh, uh,
Do you need Lainey's help?
no, I got it, sorry.
Okay,
Very
because I am
sorry.
useless.
Okay, as Virginia just said, oh wait, got my slides out of order.
Uh-oh.
I
Do you
just
want to
want
go
to
back?
set things up a little bit by mentioning my early work, my comic strip. Dykes to Watch Out For, which Virginia mentioned. I drew this from 1983 until 2008. It was essentially a 25-year-long soap opera about this bunch of friends. And then in 2006, I published this family memoir, Fun Home, which was a very different kind of book. Still comics, but much more searching and serious, looking into my closeted gay father's death right after I came out to my family when I was in college, and how bizarre it was to experience his funeral in the funeral home that had been our family business when I was growing up. Fun Home did surprisingly well and crossed over to a broader audience than the more subcultural one I had for my comic strip. And eventually, bizarrely, as Virginia also mentioned, it was turned into a Broadway musical. And now my latest book is kind of a mashup of these two different genres, the comic strip, soap opera, and the memoir. I think of it as a fictional memoir, a kind of auto-fiction about a cartoonist named Alison Bechdel who lives on this pygmy goat sanctuary in Vermont with her partner Holly. In real life, I do have a partner named Holly, but I don't live on a pygmy goat sanctuary. I don't even have a barn or one pygmy goat. No goats at all. I'm just making this all up, which has been great fun after many years of working really hard to tell the exact truth about my life in these memoirs. I had to invent all these goats and all these cats. In the book, I have 5 cats, which is not true in real life, though I'd sort of like to have 5 cats. In this book, Alison became well known for writing a memoir, not about her father, the funeral director, but about her father, the taxidermist. And this book got turned not into a Broadway musical, but into a prestige TV series, which Alison gave up any creative control over. And the show is now proceeding to go wildly off the rails in its 3rd season, much to her horror. Meanwhile, Alison's sister has gone full MAGA. Here's one of her Facebook posts. She's basically joined that crazy group Moms for Liberty and is trying to get Alison's book banned. So Alison's feeling pretty bad about the way the country is going. She feels like she's lost touch with her youthful political ideals. And she can't quite figure out how this happened, how she got so complacent and so embedded in consumer capitalism. She used to be adamantly against Amazon back when it first started up in the 90s, but now she just can't seem to kick her Prime membership. But the best part of the book, the most fun part of this book for me was that Alison's friends are the Dykes to Watch Out For characters from the comic strip. And they're all now, like me, in their 60s, and they're playing pickleball and raising chickens. But most importantly, they have not lost touch with their youthful idealism. They're all still doing very vital work in the community. They're doing letter writing campaigns. Sparrow is running the local Planned Parenthood. Stuart is organizing support for people in Ukraine. Lois runs the local queer youth organization. Ginger's in the trenches at the university. And Stuart and JR's kid, JR, is following in their footsteps. JR and their friend Badger organize abortion pill packing parties. As they're volunteering to clean up after a big flood, they get increasingly upset about the climate and eventually stage a very dramatic climate protest at the local Natural History Museum. So it's kind of a crazy book. It's just kind of a romp. One plot involves polyamory, where Sparrow and Stuart both fall for this same woman, Naomi, and they end up getting into a throuple. Alison flies to LA to pitch an idea for her own TV show, which will be sort of like Queer Eye, but less superficial, she says. It'll be about showing people how to free themselves from the grip of consumer capitalism and lead a more ethical life. But you'll have to read the book to see what happens. for me, the takeaway from this book is the power of community. Despite all of my worries about the state of the world right now, I know that coming together to do something about it is the answer. And these people have all been doing that all along. That is the end of my little talk.
I love that. Because they're also well-intentioned. I mean, when they talk about what percentage of their are they donating, and then we should donate more because we haven't donated enough. So all right, I'm gonna cut back, I'm gonna lose the Amazon account. I mean, it's just so I love the characters. I love the characters in this book, and how well-meaning they are, and how just how good they are. And I don't know there, and then it's sort of like sort of getting these characters and watching how they relate to each other. And some of it's, I mean, some of it, a lot of it's pretty heavy stuff. And then it's lightened up and it's funny. So you're watching them and you're understanding them. But then there's like, it's just like the cat. There's all these like back things, like the cat falling off the perch, or doing these things. And it's just so brilliant because it's just, there's so much going on in each panel. So much going on.
I'm so glad that you think that. It was really fun drawing it. There's the story, but then there's also a lot just going on in the visuals.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. And I love the goat. I love that goat, the baby goat. So cute. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be back with questions.
Okay.
But now I'm gonna ask you, Alison. Yeah, you already did it. And now, Jess Walter, where are you?
I think I'm here.
Hey, how are you?
Well, how are you, Virginia?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us about your forthcoming book. This is exciting stuff. I'm gonna just read a quick intro, and then I'm gonna ask you to tell folks what you want them to know about So Far Gone. So Jess Walter is the author of 7 previous novels, including the bestsellers The Cold Millions and Beautiful Ruins, the National Book Award finalist The Zero, and Citizen Vince, winner of the Edgar Award for Best Novel. His short fiction, collected in The Angel of Rome and We Live in Water, has won the O. Henry Prize, the Pushcart Prize, and appeared 3 times in Best American Short Stories. Jess lives in his hometown of Spokane, Washington. And his forthcoming book, So Far Gone, is a hilarious and empathetic and brilliantly provocative adventure through life in modern America about a reclusive journalist forced back into the world to rescue his kidnapped grandchildren. But it's that and so much more, starting from page 1. Ann Patchett says, a warm, funny, loving novel. It's an American original. And Tom Perrotta says, So Far Gone is a marvel. So, Jess, tell us what you want us to know about So Far Gone.
Thanks, Virginia. Well, like you said, it's my 8th novel. There's a cartoon I saw today that kind of reminds me of my main character. And it feels like all of us at some point in the last few years watching the news, like you can't look away until you've had enough. And this is a novel about a guy who's had enough. Reese Kinnick is a former environmental reporter. He gets fed up with the general state of the world, punches his conspiracy theorist son-in-law in the mouth at a Thanksgiving dinner, throws his smartphone out the car window, and decides he's going to move off the grid, hoping to live, I guess, like a modern-day Thoreau in his low-rent Walden Pond. You can put the cartoon away now. I don't write autobiographically very often, but when I was trying to think of where he would move, there was only one place I kept imagining, and that was the cinder block house where I lived as a kid, where we only had a wood stove for heat. and which my family owned until about a year ago when my brother and sister and I finally sold it. But my dad always threatened to move up there when he got fed up with the world, a mile from our nearest neighbor, and really just about as far away as you could get. There's my dad before he passed away. And so that was the place that I kept thinking that Kinnick would go. The rest of the novel I don't think is very autobiographical, except maybe the idea that I'm one of those people who can't look away. As a former journalist, I find myself watching the way these things just keep cycling back. My very first book was about Ruby Ridge, and I remember watching the way conspiracy theory and these other things just kept gripping the country. And so when I decided to write this novel, it was very much almost returning to the scene of the crime, to the place that that I keep finding myself, that I think America keeps finding itself. When the novel starts, Kinnick has already been up there for a while, and the doorbell rings, and he answers it, and it's two kids. And he says, "Magazines or chocolate bars, what do you fine young capitalists selling?" And they say, "We're your grandchildren." And he finds out his daughter's missing, and his 13-year-old granddaughter is betrothed to the radical church that his son-in-law belongs to. And it's really just a straightforward kind of comic uh, chase. He'll go to an electronica festival up in Canada, and to a militia compound. And when I was writing, I was really thinking of one of my great literary heroes, Charles Portis, who in books like Dog of the South and True Grit would write these, great, compelling stories that ranged across, the wildest parts of America and Mexico and Belize. And I'm the kind of writer who thinks it's as important to keep my influence as close as it is my insecurities. And so I really tried to write this sort of novel that I love reading, one that that is while it is concerned with current affairs, it's really about the characters, about the people, and that's what I kept returning to in this novel. Kinnick and his adorable, precocious grandchildren, and his daughter. I find that I'm sort of a romantic at heart, but the romances I write are often between couples who don't get together, like in Beautiful Ruins, or brothers, like in The Cold Millions. And this time it's really about a father trying to reconnect with his daughter. And this idea that when things get difficult, we have to connect, we have to tend our own garden, we have to take care of the people around us. And so I try to write the novel with humor and compassion, and with what my son calls my toxic optimism. Uh, and I also did what another literary hero of mine, the great Kurt Vonnegut, always advised younger writers, which was to cut the first chapter and put a villain in it. And when I was trying to think of the most villainous villain I could think of, having lived out in the woods like that and tried to raise chickens and other animals, I could think of nothing more villainous than a raccoon. And so there's a bedeviling raccoon in the novel that might be my favorite character in many ways. And that's
It's
it.
funny.
I hope you all like the novel. It was fun to read, fun to write, hopefully fun to read. And I think as all of us try to figure out how to deal with a constantly changing America, I think fiction sometimes is a great place to go, not only for escape, but also to remind us that we can laugh at the idiocies around
Mm,
us, and that things get better.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's true. I mean, this is laugh out loud funny stuff, but
That's
it's
it.
also very, thought provoking and emotionally engaging and very empathetic. So such a wonderful balance. All right. So Jess, thank you. That was great.
Okay.
And we'll be back to you. Now, lady,
Hello, I am
over to you.
here to welcome to the stage Christopher Marr. Can you come on screen for us? Christopher, you're just double checking. There we go. Perfect.
Now you can. All right. I'm here.
Hello. Um, Speaking of funny, I am so excited to hear more about your new book, Anima Rising, coming in May. Christopher, I'm going to do a little intro and then I'm going to let you take it away. So,
Okie dokie.
Chris, okay. Christopher Moore is the author of 18 previous novels, including Razzmatazz, Shakespeare for Squirrels, Noir, Secondhand Soul, Backward Blue. I feel like I have to say it that way. Fool and Lamb. When he's not writing, Chris enjoys ocean kayaking, scuba diving, photography, painting with acrylics and oils. That'd be interesting for this talk. And he lives in San Francisco. Your new book is a hilariously deranged tale of a mad scientist, a famous painter, and an undead woman's journey to self-discovery. So with that, I am going to let you take it away, and you have some fun images to go through as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as Landy said, this is my 19th novel. I have explored the Impressionists in the past. I've written 3 books based in Shakespeare. I've done a couple of books in the noir detective genre. And I thought, well, it's time to ruin romantic literature. So this is a retelling of well, it's basically not a retelling, but it's a version of The Bride of Frankenstein. Are we going to get slides? There we go, but not Elsa Lanchester. Although yeah, I put that in there because I love her hair. Um, but the book takes place in Vienna in 1911, and Vienna in 1911 was what they call a genius cluster. If you look around, there were amazing scientists, artists, writers, politicians in Vienna during time, and the most prominent artist of the time, Klimt, probably the only Art Nouveau fine artist. And he, in the book, he is coming home from a night at the opera and a dalliance with a rich widow, and he sees a naked woman floating in the Danube Canal, and he goes down onto the loading dock at water level, and he begins to draw her because she looks so much like his paintings, water and goldfish and all these young women floating in the water, and he begins to draw her, and he's fascinated by her, and then she coughs, and there's a little boy, newspaper boy, standing at the top of the wall of the canal, and he goes, well, are you drawing her because of her boobies? And Clint can't admit that's probably what he was doing, but he ends up loading her onto the newspaper boy's cart and taking her back to his studio. And when they get to his studio, they see sitting on the steps one of Klimt's, Wally Nutzel, who is based on a real person. And she has been evicted. So she's come to Klimt's studio, which is a freestanding home with a garden, and just because she has no place else to go. And he helps her get the woman into the studio, and she's feral at this point. She can barely talk. This is a drawing of Wally Nutzel by Egon Schiele, who then shows up, and he is enfant. And he has also been evicted from his home for making nude drawings of his little sister. And so he meets Wally, and they become a unit, a couple, and in real life they did as well. And Wally is hired to take care of this feral woman who doesn't speak and doesn't know idiom. And um, it's as I said, she's feral, and this is a picture of Egon Schiele that you're looking at now. Um, and uh, Klimt wants to do a painting of this woman, and he feels obligated to take care of her and so forth. And these mysterious characters are showing up at the asking about her. That he dragged a unconscious woman out of the Danube Canal. He finds out that on that same night there was a policeman, a Dutch policeman, who was beheaded at the bridge just up from where he found this woman. And so he calls her Judith after one of his paintings. And we'll see that later on in these slides. Because Judith then is a character from the Bible who beheads a Assyrian general for the good of everybody in her village. Anyway, so Clint wants to find out, help this girl find out who she is and where she came from. So, like you do, he takes her to his acquaintance Sigmund Freud, who was also in Vienna at the time, and Freud says he will regress her through hypnosis because a free association doesn't work with her, even though he hasn't done hypnosis in a while. And he begins to get her to talk about what happened before she washed up in the canal. And she talks about being in the ice and being locked in a box, and how she was dragged out onto the ice by this enormous monster. And those of you who have read Frankenstein know that's where the novel Frankenstein begins and ends. And the man who brought her onto the ice is Victor Frankenstein, and the creature that took her back out onto the ice and kept her prisoner as basically a sex slave for years is the Frankenstein monster. And this is a comedy, so that part was to make a laugh riot. But it was interesting to me, and she ends up being murdered again, in her story to Freud, and talks about what happens to her in the underworld. At which point Freud says, "I'm out," because he won't acknowledge that there's anything supernatural, and he refers the case to his protege Carl Jung, who comes up from Switzerland and starts to work with Judith, and finds out that dealt with all the Inuit gods, Raven and Sedna, who is the sea wife, Raven the trickster, but who also brought sun to the people, and the giant Inuit wolf god Akluk, who turns into a killer whale in the water in a giant wolf. And this is Judith. That was Judith, and this is, well, we went fast. And also, so the book sort of becomes a big chase scene and a mystery of all these men who are 100 years since the ice looking for Judith and chasing her through the city. And she, along with her new best friend Wally, are trying to survive and protect the other models at Klimt's studio. And then there's Jeff, the croissant eating devil dog of the North. And I just found this is the biggest Malamute I could find online. And so I put this picture in because that's what Jeff is most of the time. And he's a good boy, a silly boy. But if Judith says a certain thing and commands him, he becomes the giant wolf god of the North. And people find it disturbing because he fills a room and he has no problem with eating people. So that's sort of the story. And we sort of solve the mystery, and you get to meet all these historical figures, and everybody lives happily ever after.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was just such a delightful read. And I know there are some hard topics, but it's so funny. I was highlighting, you also sent me on a lot of Google rabbit holes. I can't imagine that sphere of people being kind of, around the same time. I had no idea. So I think the best book, I've told Virginia Grace, like I learned something, no matter fiction, not that, like you learned something. And I learned a ton, but also just being wildly entertained along the way. And I love Judith. I think like Wally, I feel very protective. I'm like, oh, right away, because all these social constructs go away. And she asks the funny questions, but it's like, it's really true. Like you didn't have that. Why wouldn't you ask that? So,
well, you know what? When we get to the Q&A, then ask me about all of the models and dealing with Gustav Klimt and all of that, because that was a challenge, but it's kind of an inside baseball thing that I'd rather somebody ask me than to
yeah,
on it.
definitely. I would love to circle back to that. Okay, I'll make
Okay.
a note. All right. Well,
Thanks.
thank you so much, and we'll see you back in just a minute.
Okay.
Okay, and then next, I'm bringing on stage, like I'm doing it. Click your camera, please. Uzma, Uzma Jalaluddin, come on down. There you go. Hi, how are you?
Great.
Thanks for being here. I'm super excited to hear more about your book as well. Um, so I'm gonna do an intro, and then I'll hand it over to you. So, Uzma Jalaluddin is a critically acclaimed and best-selling novelist, playwright, and teacher. She writes nuanced and entertaining stories about Muslims, South Asians, and Canadians, and is the author of Much Ado About Nada, Three Holidays and a Wedding, Hannah Han Carries On, and Aisha at Last, as well as her first play, The Rishta. Her novels have been optioned for film and television, including by Amazon Studios and by Mindy Kaling. You're a high school English teacher and a former contributor to the Toronto Star and the Atlantic, and you live in Toronto with your family. And we're so excited to hear more about this read with a little side of murder, which we love, and I can't wait to ask you more at the end. But I want to hear from you. Tell us more about Detective Auntie coming out in May.
Yes, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So Detective Auntie is basically a project that I've been wanting to write for years and years, but as I'm sure my fellow panelists can tell you, that sometimes you have this shiny new idea and you just don't get a chance to really develop it because you're on deadline and you have like 5 other books to write. So Detective Auntie is my debut mystery, and I'm coming at it from a big fan of the golden age of detective stories, which I grew up reading. My mother, my parents are from India. They immigrated to Canada many decades ago, and my mother used to tell me that my grandfather in India was a big fan of course, Agatha Christie, which is kind of funny. And so he used to read a lot of Agatha Christie books, and I grew up wanting to be inspired by my grandfather, also reading a lot of Agatha Christie books. And I was really interested in sort of that. It's called like the fair play mystery, where like the reader plays along and tries to solve the mystery before the detective does. And I was also inspired by this idea of the Miss Marple character in Agatha Christie. And Miss Marple, for those of you who don't know, is sort of like this unmarried woman, an older woman who lives in this little tiny town, little tiny village, really, in somewhere in the UK. And basically, because of her deep observational skills, she knows her neighbors so well that she can solve mysteries that are presented to her. And so Agatha Christie, along with the Hercule Poirot character, the Miss Marple character, is very, very popular. And I had this idea a long time ago to write the Desi, the South Asian Miss Marple. But my Miss Marple, whose name is Kausar Khan, is a little bit different. She is a woman in her late 50s. She's a widow. She lost her partner about a year ago, and she lives in this little tiny town called North Bay, which is in northern Ontario. And one day she's, about a year after her husband has passed, she's sitting in her small town, and she gets a call from her daughter who lives in Toronto, and her daughter says, "You need to come to Toronto right now because I've just been arrested on suspicion of a murder charge." And so she drops everything and she goes back to Toronto, which is a city that she has not returned to in over 15 years for very tragic reasons. And so over the course of Detective Auntie, Gosser basically has this moment of like reinvention of like, I've spent my entire life taking care of others. What am I going to do now? I have plans for my future for my second act, and now I have to help my adult daughter navigate this murder charge. So she essentially goes into auntie mode. She starts interrogating suspects. She knows the community very well. The community that she lives in is a very diverse community that is full of yeah, first and second generation immigrants who are often very reluctant to talk to police, but they will talk to an auntie because she's completely harmless. And in this way, she clears her daughter's name and she learns something about herself. And I'm really excited for readers to be introduced to my book on May 6th. And this is the American cover, and I'm Canadian. This is the Canadian cover.
I love that. They look very nice on the shelf together. So yeah, I thought what was so special about her is, yes, she has this ability to kind of see things and put things together, but I think she also has this great power to just like see people. There's a great part when she is kind of starting the case and she meets this young woman outside, and she says, she believed that the girl probably frequently had been asked who she was and where she fit in, which likely made her feel like she fit in nowhere. And it stuck with me. And I think she sees people and gives them a chance maybe that people don't give her.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I was trying to rehabilitate the idea of the auntie, because oftentimes the auntie gets kind of a bad rap, right? And so much of that idea is true, but it's also wrapped up in ideas of like the patriarchy and women not having any power. And I really wanted to give this older South Asian woman who looks a certain way and dresses in cultural clothing, and oftentimes is just kind of ignored by society because of her age and her socioeconomic standing and her, I wanted to give her some power back. And so I made her an incredibly intelligent detective. But thank you for that.
Or sometimes being unseen gives you the ability to see some more things. Yeah, totally. That's a big power to the deck. Thank you. We'll bring you back in a minute. I'm gonna hand it over to Virginia.
Hi. So interesting. All these books are so different, and there's a sort of a common thread here. So now let's bring on Meg Mitchell-Moore. Hi, Meg. You need to unmute. There you go.
Hi, here I am.
Yay. So thank you so much, Meg. Let me do a brief intro, and then I'll ask you to talk to folks and let them know what you want them to know about Mansion Beach, your book that's coming out in May. Meg Mitchell-Moore is the USA Today bestselling author of 8 novels. She has an undergraduate degree from Providence College and a master's degree in English literature from New York University. She worked for several years as a journalist for technology, business, and lifestyle publications before turning to fiction. She loves writing, reading, and running on the North Shore of Massachusetts and spending time with and attempting to rein in the chaos of her husband, their 3 young daughters, adult daughters, and 2 exuberantly shedding golden retrievers. Meg's forthcoming book, Mansion Beach, is a sparkling novel that follows a young woman entwined in the opulent lives of her neighbors on Block Island, and it's set against a backdrop of scandal, secrets, and a not-so-subtle love triangle. This is perfect for readers of Pineapple Street and Sex and Vanity. Meg, tell everyone what you want them to know about Mansion Beach.
I will. Thank you so much for having me, and to be in the company of these other fabulous authors is such a delight. I'm going to start just with this little quote from Elizabeth Egan in the New York Times about, I think it was in 2019 when she usually does a roundup of beach books or summer reads. And I really loved this thing she said about them. She said, "These books are the cool aunts of the literary world. They drive with the top down and take you to new places. They're memorable, challenging, warm, and wise. They should not be underestimated. They will steal your day and, yes, your heart." And I love that. And the category of beach books or summer reads is relatively new in the publishing world. Nobody called beach reads books set on beach places beach reads 100 years ago. And so when I was promoting a book a couple years ago, and my publicist had asked me for ideas of essays to write that she could promote to publications, I had recently been listening to an audiobook of The Great Gatsby. There's a fabulous Audible version where the actor Jake Gyllenhaal is the narrator. And of course, I read that book in high school, as I'm sure you all did. I read it in college. I read it in graduate school, but it had been a long time since I had revisited it. And I listened to the audio version and I thought, this is a beach book. This is a summer read. And so I said to my publicist, The Great Gatsby was a beach book before beach books. And she very politely said that has nothing to do with the book that we're promoting, but thank you. It's nice to know. But I couldn't get that idea out of my head. So as I was thinking about my next book, I kept thinking about these themes in The Great Gatsby, which will be 100 years old this summer or this year in 2025, how relevant they still are today. And so it has all these parties and it has cocktails, The Great Gatsby, not my book, but also my book, parties and cocktails and a love triangle and extramarital affairs. And it gets into these questions of money and class that are evergreen and I think really endlessly fascinating. So I never wrote the essay because it had nothing to do with my book Vacationland that I was talking about at the time, but I couldn't let it go. As I was starting to think about my next book, and I knew I wanted to set one more book on Block Island, where I had set two previous novels, which for anyone who doesn't know is a small island off the coast of Rhode Island. It's 7 miles long. It has about 1,000 year-round residents, but the population really swells in the summer. It has a huge summer population. It has a lot of day trippers. It has people who come for a weekend, but it's not Nantucket. It's not Martha's Vineyard. It's not sort of fancy in that way. It's got a whole different vibe, and it's a really wonderful place. So I had set 2 books there, and I was looking to do one more just to make it 3 and then move on to another place. So I started thinking, well, what if instead of East Egg and West Egg on Long Island, we go to Block Island and we have 2 sides of this great salt pond, which is one of the very many ponds on Block Island, but it's very big. And what if we put all of those questions in a modern context? And what if I shape those same questions into a beach read? Because those themes are really still so relevant. Those questions of wealth and class and the pursuit of the American dream, and the question of whether you can become an insider if you started as an outsider, the recklessness of the wealthy for sure today, social and moral decay for sure today. All of those questions are still so relevant, and maybe even more so. So I dove right in and I decided to write Mansion Beach. I don't call it a retelling of Gatsby because doesn't follow everything along the plot lines, but I call it inspired by, for sure. So instead of a Jay Gatsby character, we have a woman named Juliana George, who's pulled herself up from the bootstraps fashion tech entrepreneur who has come to Block Island, bought this beautiful mansion, and is throwing these parties. And we have this love interest, somebody from her past, we don't know how, named David Buchanan, who's married to a wealthy land developer. And then we have David's cousin, Nicola, who's observing the goings on of this wild and reckless summer around her, while she's also involved in her own love affair and her own life and her own job on the island. So that's the book. You don't need to know or even like The Great Gatsby to like this book. It certainly stands on its own. It's got its own plot. It's got its own momentum. It's got its own dead body. Gatsby has 3 dead bodies. My book has 1. So it's got suspense. It's got the summer setting. But if you are familiar with Gatsby, for sure, you'll get a lot of the references. There's some winks and nods to different parts of that classic. So what I think I want people to take away from this book is mostly, I want this to be a bright spot. It's a really dark world right now for so many different reasons. Things are chaotic and uncertain, and the people who got early reads of this book, a few people were reading in December and early January, and they said, this was exactly what I needed. This was exactly the kind of book that I need right now. And so I like to think of it as a bright spot, not for the character who died, but for everybody else. It's a pretty wild ride. It's a fun read. And I want people to, if they can't go on vacation and they wish they were drinking a mudslide on the beach, to read this book and feel like they are, and they don't have to think any more about it than that. If they want to think about all of those themes I mentioned and how relevant they are today, that's all there too. And if they finish the book and they immediately look up the ferry times for Block Island to see when they can get there, then I feel like I did my job.
Yes, job well done. Exactly. Yeah, I feel like Block Island is a character in and of itself in the book, and I understand what you're saying about just these evergreen, and everything just comes back again and again and again. It's just retellings the stories with different characters, and but it's strange, isn't it? It's strange how things just I don't know, they just keep coming back.
It's true.
There's a great quote from Jamie Day, the author of The Block Party, who loves this great quote, and there's so much to say here, but they say Mansion Beach offers everything you could want in a summer read: a tightly woven, simmering plot, characters layered with complexity, and a setting that makes you feel the sun on your face on your face and a warm breeze on your back. It's a perfect blend of intrigue and humor that will keep you turning the pages. And as I think has been the common theme here tonight, it's really that we need some escapism, but also there's so much heft to all of these books, and so which is wonderful. You know, the pages turn, and you escape for a little bit, and then you're thinking, and you're, sort of wondering about these characters, and anyway, it's a beautiful book. So thank you, Meg.
Yeah.
Let's bring everybody back on.
I want like a quote that says, "This book has its own dead body." I love that.
And get a mudslide.
Get a mudslide for sure.
Thank you all so much. This was great. So Lainey wrote, "This book has its own dead body." And so we have some questions and we have some time. We don't have to stop right at 8 o'clock, though we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I will go back to a question from Sylvia Buonani, who asks Alison, how long from the publication of Fun Home to the premiere on stage? How long was the publication? And were you involved in the process of adapting?
I was not at all involved in the process of adapting, and that's sort of where this my current book picks up. Like, what would have happened if it wasn't a good adaptation? I was very lucky. The people who made Fun Home into a musical did a brilliant job, but that was just good luck. And it could have gone horribly awry, and so it's always fun to play with what that might have looked like. But the book was published in 2006. 6 years later, it opened at the Public Theater as a musical, and in 2015, it opened on Broadway.
I read in an interview that you had concerns about it being made into a movie, right?
I did initially, yeah. I got a offer to option it for film, and I didn't exactly say no, but I asked for more money and they wouldn't give it to me. So I was like, oh, I'm well out of that. Because I didn't want to see a bad movie made of my book. That just seemed awful. But I agreed to having a musical made of it. I don't quite understand that, except that I didn't really know much about musicals, and it seemed so, distant from my own form that it didn't bother me to think of it as a musical.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Totally get that. You could see that being really destroyed in a film, being sort of like, I don't know, cookie cutter or something. And that show was just so powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. Lainey, I think you have a question.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question for Jess Walter. So they were intrigued by saying you were a newspaper writer and mentioned journalism. So they want to know if you have any notable stories you covered, because you mentioned Ruby Ridge, and they want to know if you have any others you'd like them to know about. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I think my journalism background keeps popping up. I left newspapers in the 90s, still kept a foot in, but I was at ground zero in covering the terrorist attacks, and that made its way into my novel, The Zero. There's a character, my novel, The Financial Lives of the Poets, was set at the same time as the financial crisis of 2008. And every once in a while, as a novelist, I feel like I'll just stick my head out the car window and describe what's happening as the country goes off the road. And maybe it's a compulsion I feel, but I do find myself, drawn back there. I was at the O.J. Simpson trial. I sometimes feel like journalism has led me to some of the biggest events in the country. And as proud of my journalism career as I am, and as much as I love journalism, and as much as I'm horrified by the attacks on free speech right now and the attacks on journalists, I also think sometimes fiction is a more complete way to approach some of those things, to come back and look at them. So yeah, I'm constantly torn by those two jobs, and I sometimes wish I could like put on a journalist cape and run out and start reporting stories, but I'm sure I'd get stuck at a school board meeting or something and immediately want my novelist job back.
That's fair. But I now have a million follow-up questions, but I will spare you. That's very interesting.
They can write me and ask them. I'll answer them.
So Christopher, I want to circle back to what we ended on. We wanted to circle back to Klimt and the women who were his muses, I guess I'll say, who were his models. Do you want to talk more about that? How you wrote that historical, how you wrote that? I'll just leave it at that and let you talk about it. Oh, hold on. Grace, can you ask to unmute for some reason? I think there's a.
There we go. Thank
Yeah,
you.
oh, perfect.
No, the thing that was interesting that sort of plays as a subtext that you can't talk about when you're doing a quick synopsis is that, you know, I like reading historical fiction because there's no cell phones, um, which are awful. You know, they're either really convenient for writing fiction or really awful, and I find them awful most of the time. But I had written previously the book Sacre Bleu, which sort of covers the entire timeline of the Impressionists, the French Impressionists, and there was a dozen artists, characters in that. Well, Vienna didn't have that richness of artists, and Klimt sort of there, and he was the one that everybody knew and everybody does know, and so I was him, and I knew every book I read about him said he kept scores of young women, half a dozen at a time, at his studio at all times. And even when he was doing a formal portrait, some of which have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars now, he would leave that formal portrait in the parlor that who was sitting for that and go into this drawing room, which literally was for drawing, and draw and chat, then go back out. And it was just the line that was in every book was, it was understood that if you modeled for the master, you would share his bed. And that became really problematic as I was writing this book. And I was like, oh man, because I liked the guy's paintings, but it's a different world. And so the short form of it is Wally Neutzel, who is the character that I talked about you meet in the book, and Judith. Um, it she's a 17-year-old girl who's been modeling for, professionally for 4 years, and you just sort of see the I don't even know what the word is, that just the power imbalance and abuse of this just power that was just assumed. I mean, nobody scolds the artists of the time for that. That was understood, and there's a lot of aspects of the society that was, these girls that had jobs modeling for Klimt were much better off than they would have been if they were walking the street. And were paid much better, and he took care of them. But I had to kind of deal with that, especially in the context of a book that was about a woman who was created to be a mate for a monster, and so that became the theme of the book. And it was again, as I said when I was doing the synopsis, writing a comedy in that context just naturally made you have to go, okay, I have to not out about this. The girls have to, they're obviously surviving. They obviously did survive. Some of them thrived, and you have to just portray it. And it was a challenge. And I'm not sure I pulled it off, but it was really not something when I conceived of doing, The Bride of Frankenstein and then moving into Vienna in 1911. I didn't anticipate that I was going to be dealing with sort of the lack of power among women forever. basically, and what came forth. And I learned a lot, and it was interesting meeting the female characters who were starting to grab their characters and they grab their power, and they're in the book. Inlee Flog, who is sort of Klimt's constant companion, and she is the Coco Chanel of Vienna, and Alma Mahler, who is just books and books have been written about the wife of Gustav Mahler, who just went from Gustav Mahler to Walter Gropius, who started the Bauhaus, to the guy whose name eludes me right now, who wrote Song of Bernadette and came to Hollywood with her and became a famous screenwriter. So anyway, it was just something that I want to talk about, but it's not in the book, and it's you're going to notice it, I think.
No, I'm really glad you brought it up. I'm glad it's at the end of the book too, because you have this parallel, like you said. And I think it's also going to be good for book clubs to talk about that too. You can't avoid it, but you have to write about it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking about it.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. There's a question from Samantha King for Uzma. She wants to know if you have plans to make this into a series.
Yes, I do. Great question. I'm actually writing the sequel to Detective Auntie right now. I'm halfway through drafting, and that's always fun. So I hope it'll be a series, but of course, that really depends on how Detective Auntie does and if there's a demand for it. But at least there will be two. So it'll be a duology at the very least, and hopefully more. But I have lots of plans for it to turn into a series. I think a lot of detective mystery novels, crime novels tend to be series, and I think there's enough legs for it to continue. Hopefully,
Very exciting. I think Lainey has a question for Meg, but I can't not read this. Monica McCabe says, "Tonight I will be dreaming about baby goats and villainous raccoons attacking Carl Jung."
I love that. That was great. Yes, so Meg, I have a question. Did you spend a lot of time on the island before or while you were writing Mansion Beach or the previous two novels?
I did, yes. I didn't know it at all when I started The Islanders, which is my first novel set there. I just wanted to explore it as a place to set a novel. I had never been there. So I went, I loved it, and then I have gotten to know it really well over the past, I don't know, 6 years. So I made a bunch of trips. For the last summer, for the very first time, my family spent a whole week there, which was it was so exciting. I had never been for more than 2 days, 3 days, 1 day. But I did go a lot, and I have learned a lot about it. And I have been told by the locals I've done okay. There's always like one little thing, like the trash day is not the right. I mean, they don't even get trash pickup. I feel like I made a mistake about like a mailbox, and they don't have mailboxes. There's something in one book. I've since fixed it. But there's a lot to learn about a place that, especially an island with year-round people who really know how things work. And Mansion Beach has a lot of things about the town council and the building zones. And, there's somebody's trying to build a hotel. And I don't know yet. I hope I got it right. But I have tried really hard to get to know what life is like there. And I read the Block Island Times online all the time. And I have a lot of sources there who hopefully have told me all the right things about it.
It's such a community unto itself. I mean, I used to go to Fire Island on Long Island, and it's the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. It's like it's not the Hamptons and it's not the mansions. It's these old beach houses, but there's all this stuff that goes on.
Exactly.
It's like, don't let them catch you throwing out, plastic water bottles. They'll kill you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I wanted to ask Alison, I see a case behind you that's either a craftsman's tool box or it's a drawing case. Do you draw all your own art for your books?
I do. Until recently, in the middle of the deadline for this book, I had a crazy conversion to digital drawing just because it's so much faster and I was so far behind my deadline. But this is just flat files for my artwork.
Okay.
it looks like a tool,
It does. It works though.
like a
It
mechanic.
is your toolbox.
It
Your
is, that's
tools
right.
are in
Yeah,
there.
there you go. Hey, I won't follow up, but I want to follow up. Is it different when you're thinking about your story? Are you thinking in terms of those images, or are you thinking in terms of a story in a text line basis, or actually visualizing, the real dramatization of it?
I write in Adobe Illustrator, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm not drawing there, but I'm writing and mapping out my panels and my word balloons, and I'm envisioning what's in the panels. So it's this kind of
Ah,
hybrid of writing and drawing without actually drawing.
oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has questions, that if any of the authors want to ask anything, this is it. I mean, we're just a little bit after 8, but this is just a really great opportunity for librarians and for readers to hear from all of you. Taking the time to do this is just wonderful. It just adds a whole new dimension, really, and a depth to your books, to hear your voice, to why you wrote these books. And there's so much going on in the world, and it's just it's escapism in a way, but we're also seeing what we're escaping. And I just think that there's some wonderful stuff going on here. There's a question for Jess from Carol Ann Visiotech, we love. And she says, I absolutely love the Cold Millions and the audio was excellent. Will there be an audio for So Far Gone, and who is the narrator?
Yeah, that was I love the audio too. It was a full cast, which was really great to hear because they're Native American characters and a vaudeville singer from 1909, and it was great to hear these great actors embody those characters. But Eduardo Ballerini, who first did my novel Beautiful Ruins, and has done most everything since. Um, Hopefully we'll do So Far Gone also. There are fewer characters, and so I doubt that they go with a full cast. But I'm waiting to hear. I see Eduardo quite a bit. I did one of my books just before Eduardo started doing them, and I used to think I was pretty good at it. And even though the only voice I do is Sean Connery's, and he never seems to show up in my novels, and Eduardo has just such a range of abilities. And so hopefully he'll do this one too, and get all those strange Northwest uh, place names right.
He's fantastic. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've worked together since 2012, and we actually wrote a short story together for my last collection, The Angel of Rome. We sort of plotted it out together and talked about it, and then I flew to New York and we table read it, which was like the coolest thing, like a movie almost, having this actor kind of read the characters out. And now I recently adapted it for a film, so it's taken this long circuitous route to possibly being in that form too. So yeah, he's a terrific really terrific reader and a good writer too. Is kind of a poet by heart, so it's been fun to work with him over the years.
There's just so much love here in the comments. Thank you for all these great questions and answers, and this has been a welcome bomb. Eileen Marquardt says, yay, go Detective Auntie. Any fans out there? And Samantha King says, I love these discussions and interviews because we get to learn how these stories make it onto the page. So yes, thank you. And I think maybe we've come to the end of our questions, unless I'm wrong. So Grace, Laney, if I've missed anything, let me know. Otherwise, if we want to go around the table, really the virtual table, well, Lillian just asked it. Lillian Dabney. Well, she wants to know if Jess still writes 365 days a year. But the question for everybody is, what are you all reading? So if we just want to go around and say what, if you're reading anything that you're loving or you've already read it and you just, want to let people know about it, now's the time. Librarians love to know this.
I'm reading Sue Halpern's What We Leave Behind, which I saw is coming up in a week or two. And I'm really loving it. I'm not very far in, so I don't really know what it's about, but it's very fun so far.
Ah, I love her.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And everyone can come hear from Sue in March, I think. No, April.
She's fantastic.
I'll go next. I just finished Long Island Compromise by Taffy Brodesser Ackner.
So good. Oh my God.
Great depiction of Hollywood. It made me cry. And I'm making my way through a wonderful Italian writer named Natalia Ginsburg, whose work I love. And just read a great story collection by a young writer named Jared Lemus called Guatemalan Rhapsody.
Oh.
I'll go. I just finished a book called the novella, I guess, called The Most by Jessica Anthony, which was gorgeous. Highly recommend it. I'm reading Slow Dance by Rainbow Rowell, and on audio, I am listening to, I can't remember if it's Beautiful Ugly or Ugly Beautiful. Does anybody know? Beautiful Ugly, I think, which is fantastic as well. Really good narration in that book.
I'll go next. I'm reading Bob Crace's The Big Empty, and I had to look up which I'm reading the fourth Slow Horses book by Mick Herron. Spook Street is the name of it, but I wasn't sure which one I was on, so that's what I'm reading now.
I'm one of the books that I really, sorry, I enjoyed reading was The Wedding People, Alison Espach. I know that's a popular one. And a book that I blurbed and I really, really enjoyed. It's coming out a little bit later, I think next week sometime, is called Yours Eventually by Noura Maznavi. She's a debut writer. And it's basically a reimagining of Jane Austen's Persuasion, which is one of my favorite books. So keep an eye out for that. Yours Eventually.
Can I add one thing? I didn't know we were allowed to say more than one book.
Yes.
I just read an amazing graphic novel by Mimi Pond. It's called Do Admit, and it's a graphic biography of the Mitford sisters. And it's insane.
Oh,
This is coming out later this year. It's just so wild.
well,
Do admit.
Yes, that was one of their private family little lingo things.
I love that. Yeah. Can always tell us what you're reading if there's anything else. Now, Grace, were you able to get all them? Because usually Grace can put them all together and just let people know, put a little catalog together.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through them really quick. Just to make sure I got them all. I have What We Leave Behind, Long Island Compromise, Guatemalan Rhapsody, Slow Dance, Beautiful Ugly, The Big Empty, Spook Street, The Wedding People, and then Yours Eventually. And I have Do Admit as well. Did I miss any?
I've never seen someone write down some recs faster.
All right. All right. I'll send it in the chat for everyone as well.
That's great. Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think that's it. I want to make sure that I think we've gotten to everybody's questions, and I again want to be respectful of your time. We thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time to talk with librarians tonight and tell them about your books. This is a really, really wonderful program tonight, and we it's just can't thank you enough. So we have Alison Bechdel Spent was on sale May 20th. Jess Walter, So Far Gone, goes on sale June 10th. Christopher Moore, Anna Rising, on sale May 13th. Uzma, Jalaluddin, Detective Auntie, Detective Auntie was on sale May 6th. And Meg Mitchell Moore, Mansion Beach, on sale May 27th.
Yay.
Did it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting you all.
Nice seeing you all.
Have a great night. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, all. Thank you, and thank you all
Bye.
for watching tonight. Thanks, Lainey.
Bye.
Thanks, Grace.
Sad. Bye.